All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Do You Guru podcast. My guest today is Derek Lundsten. He is the president, chief culture officer of Life Guides, servant leader, which I just told you how much I love that, Derek, innovative entrepreneur, and angel investor. Derek, welcome to the podcast, brother. So great to have you.
Hager, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I was just saying in the green room, I'm fortunate that I get to do these interviews often. I even lead my own podcast, Rebels with a Heart, and we're going to get together on that at some point. But I actually was acknowledged, and I have some butterflies on my stomach for this conversation, which is highly unusual. I don't get nervous for speaking engagements or podcasts, but for some reason today I have that. So I wanted to name that for the audience. So this should be a fun conversation.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, and thank you for sharing that. I think, we just spent 40 minutes catching up and talking and having such a great conversation. So I'm excited to be able to drop in and have our audience get to know you a little bit more. Let's start with a little bit about your journey to getting to Life Guides. And we're going to talk in depth about what that is. But how did you go from, all right, welcome to the world, to all of a sudden you're at this company?
Yeah, that's a very layered and winding path. So I'll kind of walk in reverse a little bit as opposed to starting from the beginning, and we'll just see what kind of arises from that.
We're going to Tarantino this shit. I love it, man. That's We'll start at the end. We'll go to the beginning. We'll hit the middle. This is the way to do it, man. That's great storytelling.
Absolutely. So I was an early investor in Life Guides. I met my business partners, Mark Donahue in particular, through an entrepreneurs group almost a decade ago now, and that was called Abundance 360. It was in Los Angeles, actually, and that is now part of Singularity University. And that whole idea was, how do we use technology to, exponentially change the world? This was over a decade ago, right? Keep in mind when we were part of this group originally, it was, how do we use these disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, longevity around genomics, just really, cryptocurrencies, all the things that are that are happening now, and personalized medicine, these different things we were talking about 10 years ago, and a lot of space travel, all these different things, like really kind of far out there ideas. And what Mark and I in particular had in common, as well as some of the other partners that we brought into the business from that community, was, as opposed to focusing on just using technology alone, we were sharing this idea of what makes human beings special. And in a world of technological advancement, what's going to always exist, right? 100 years from now, even if we live in this world of some of the technological innovations we just talked about, what is still going to be core to being a human being? And one of the things that we shared or saw in common was that, and we're talking about this now, sharing our stories, sharing our life experiences, sharing our emotions, sharing the things that make us unique in our existence and our attributes, and a platform need to actually help people to do that in a scalable way. So if you think back, outside of my journey, back to the origin of humanity, this has been in existence, this concept, since the origin of tribalness, right? The idea that you would seek your elders, you would seek those who were ahead of you. If something happened to your child, you'd connect with other parents. If something happened in your health, you'd connect with the healers in the community. And so that existed on a very local level. And we had those deep relationships, and we hear about, you're in Costa Rica, so you're kind of close to it. We hear about the experiences that happen in those communities, and we've lost that to some extent in this technologically driven world. But we are now a globally connected tribe, in the sense that the internet, you're in Costa Rica, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're having a conversation right as if we're in the same room. And so the idea that we can now match people or connect people who are sharing their stories, and one of the topics we started in was caregiving, but it applies to everything: relationships, health, family, identity, career, you name it. Like every topic you can imagine, we have a platform to help people find their quote unquote guide. And so the reason I tell that story, because I was drawn by that idea, and I felt literally to our conversation drawn spiritually to be involved in this concept of connecting people using a technological platform. And the phrase, if you will, that even drew me specifically in was this idea of reducing unnecessary suffering, right? This concept that, hey, if you have the connection to talk with someone who's been there, been through it, to help on their path, you reduce unnecessary struggle and suffering. You have someone who's there to help you and advocate and support you, even though the personal work is still the responsibility of that person. That helps anyone go through that. And so That's why I chose to invest. And previously to that, at the time when I met my partners, I was building another education startup company, which I've since exited. But we were early on delivering training and educational content and gamifying that and doing micro learning back in 2012 when the iPad first came to market. And we did a lot of work in the healthcare space. And so again, that was the draw on that business, was helping people be better educated, helping people achieve in their career, helping them achieve in their life. And so life guides to me represented the next evolution of that, not just helping them be successful in their career, but helping people truly to be reaching their highest potential, to work through, do that deeper work that we had talked about in the green room, to help them find their potential, help them find their path, help them find their purpose, and to know that this exists. And so going back even further, I've been fortunate to work and have different entrepreneur partners that I've worked with over my career. And I'm very much an entrepreneur, as we talked about. But you used the word in the green room about being a seeker. I was a philosophy major in college, right? And specifically, I love existentialism, right? That was the whole basis was, why are we here, right? So at a young age of this going way back, at the age of 7, I was asking myself, why am I here? Right. And that was the point that at that young age, that has driven me through my life around the work. And I've gone through different religious and spiritual and intellectual paths exploring that. And business, for whatever reason, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, has felt like the arena where my gifts and skills and the world's needs has conspired for things to be impacted. Right. And for me to personally bring certain abilities to the market and to help people through that, and to use business as a platform for good. And for whatever reason, when I go back to college, even though I didn't study business, I saw that opportunity around. We hear about this idea of conscious capitalism, that money is a tool, money is a vehicle, money is an energy that we can use to influence change and accelerate change. And I saw that, and I think part of the opportunity is I have this ability to see where dots and trends and ideas intersect or could intersect. And then I've developed the ability to help actually bring that together through different relationships, through ideas, through capital. But at a core level, I'm a human being on this journey of self-discovery, like all of us, and have navigated I've navigated the ups and downs and the joys and triumphs and the struggles of that and the uncertainty of all that, right? And I think that I was really appreciative of how open and vulnerable you were, Hager, in that story of your life journey, and just getting to know each other. But yeah, I mean, the idea is, how do we bring that experience in a fast changing, technologically connected world where spiritual structures, religious structures, societal expectations are shifting, but that core need of belonging, of purpose, of meaning, of connection, of trust, I feel that literally in my solar plexus. That is what makes us human. That's what we're ultimately here doing. And we're part of Life Guide's mission is to help more people understand that and be a part of that on whatever way they choose. Because again, we'll talk more about the platform and where it works, but there's a relationship taking place between the guide and the guided, if you will, or members, and helping. And there's a mutual value to even being exchanged of sharing stories, helping people equip their journey, and that is a virtuous cycle that we're cultivating. So anyway, that's a little bit of an answer. I can tell that this is resonating with you, at least on some level. And yeah, man, I'm happy to go into more of the specifics, but on my life journey. But that's kind of the business journey of how I ended up in Life Guides. So,
man, that was an amazing kickoff to this podcast, brother, because you said so many things that I would love to go back to and touch on.
Sure.
One of the things that I think is really beautiful is you talked about going to college and being a philosophy major at this 7 years old. Why am I here? What's going on? To ask that big of a question, existentially stepping into that and then following that, right? Because a lot of people, why do they go to college? I want to get a job. I want to do this. I want to do that. You went the exact opposite way, and like, I'm going to follow my heart and I'm going to see where this takes you. And what, like the joke is like, oh, a philosophy major, so you're not going to do shit when you get out of here, right? Like how many parents have said that to their kids at one point or another? Yeah. And yet through that evolution of really asking those questions, you really found your path. Yeah. And, I think that's a beautiful thing to elaborate on is talk about, because you said, like, I started to see how these things connect. Yeah. Like, talk about going in to study philosophy and then how you really, because I can tell that you are very philosophical about your life, about your
Yeah.
business, about your spirituality. Talk about like what opened up in college to get you to really see that your gift to the world was going to be in business.
Yeah. So multi-layered to that. So, when I was in my late teens, I actually was not even sure. My parents, to their credit, I really instilled the value of education, and they wanted me to get an education, and I appreciate that so much. Right, the opportunity that was gifted in that way, and about 16, 17, I was really adventurous at heart. Right, I was like, I want to go. I was really intrigued about going to the military and because I wanted to travel the world, and I thought that was a pathway to adventure, and I was convincing my folks that that was the journey that I wanted to pursue. And to their credit, they didn't say no to that, but they just kind of redirected me and said, "Hey, we really want you to go to college. We think this is the best path for you."
Well,
Yeah,
what if we did that after?
yeah, exactly. And so they really they kind of indulged it, and then because I really didn't know what I wanted to quote unquote be when I grew up. To your point, like I didn't know what that career path was. I was fortunate. My dad was an attorney, and he was really successful at that. But he said, I don't think that's the right path for you. He kind of acknowledged that. I went off to college. First, I studied psychology first. I was a double major, so I thought maybe I'd do something in that space. Maybe I'd go into research. As I got into that, I was like, no, that wasn't it. And so I came back one time midway through school and said, I want to study philosophy. My dad, to his credit, was really supportive of that, because he's like, it'll help you frame your thinking. It'll give you a pathway around what you're doing. So I had,
Just in case you want to be a lawyer, you can frame your thinking.
Right? And that was partly, that's your point. That was part of my thinking. Maybe I'll go to law school, and there's that, because there's a correlation there, right? So, but then about midway through college, I just was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm not going to become a PhD in psychology, and I'm not even going to become a professional philosopher for that matter, right? I was like, a lot of my friends were business majors, and they were making money, and I was really enjoying the social aspect. And to be blunt, I wanted to make money, right? That was what came through for me at that time. It was like, that was important. And I saw that as a pathway to freedom or creation or what you want to call it. And I was like, my friends are doing this. I can do it better, almost, is how I felt at the time. Right. And so I literally went door to door with my resume midway through college to get an internship in business, even though I had no background on it. And just that ambition and that determination to do it, quote unquote, my way, was part of the pathway for how that happened. But the philosophy component all along still maintained a key part of it, because it was always about this. It was always about following a thread, following the path, following the steps that were either laid out or overcoming certain things along the way to make things happen. And that's been core, for whatever reason, through my entire life experience, for lack of a better term, this experience of Derek, that from a young kid, I've kind of just always been aware and perceiving and learning and feeling and putting that together. And I've always had a really strong gift to connect with people and understand and really learn about them. I find human beings fascinating. I find relationships fascinating. I find what motivates people fascinating. And I think that goes back into building teams and building communities. And, some of these things, some of these skills, have been developed and forged over time through genuine practice, intentional practice, and also some of it has just been, divinely guided, for lack of a better term. And I do believe in that, right? Like, to our point, I really believe that call it God. Like, in my experience, that's what I do. Yeah. That is helping to, create the pathways for our life. And there are definite choices and opportunities along the way. And I definitely believe that there's a sense of cosmic lessons that keep coming back around until you figure them out. Right. So.
Yeah. And I think another thing that really resonates with me, Derek, and I just want to point this out. I'm sure you've hit on it or felt it before, but what you're saying is, like, you're talking about listening to these breadcrumbs that have been coming in from your soul, from God, from source. Right.
Yeah.
And, one of the things and I'm just going to talk as a parent, my level of appreciation for this, because I know that your kids are going to grow up being able to be guided to listen to what they want and to follow their thread. And I think, for so many people, my belief and my experience in a lot of ways was, it's okay. That's not practical, and don't do this and do this. And we teach kids to go against what that inner voice is saying.
Yes.
Yeah, you go against nature, and so this level of mistrust starts to come up, and like,
Yeah.
well, I can't trust myself because mom and dad said it's got to be, law school, and then get a good job at an internship somewhere, and then go here, and we're fighting against our nature to do something that we're being told is going to allow us to fit in, and then what happens? Like we find ourselves like shelled up, and like, where am I? Like, what is this even what I want to
Yeah.
do? Is this where I want to be? And it happens for you in like what I would say sequentially such a beautiful order,
Yeah.
because for so many, we hit 40, 45, and it's like, what am I doing? I
Yes.
don't want any of this shit, right? Where do I go? How do I start listening to me? I don't even know what I want. And I talked to quite a few of my friends are coaches, and they say the hardest thing that for somebody to answer sometimes is, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that thread of like being able to follow what you want, so beautiful to hear that like you were encouraged by that by your dad, that they didn't dismiss, okay, well, I don't know that the military is for you. And to be able to walk through that is such encouragement to go through school, to be so open and just
Yeah.
see what comes available to you.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Hager, and environment and structure to evaluate that and explore that, and to unpack the layers of that. And for myself, really started early, and I'm grateful for that, because I believe, to your point, it is helping me to be a better person, a better leader, a better husband, a better father now. And I
Yeah.
think ultimately helping me to share this, for lack of a better term, this download for human beings to have through life guides, right? But I think, to that point, one of the things that for me, when I was 25, I kind of had that same moment where I had, okay, a few years out of school, I was making at that age really good money, right? Because I had a goal, and I went and I accomplished it after getting out of school and getting into business. I went and I accomplished that, but I was still having this moment of, well, what am I doing here? What's this all for? Like at one point I was like, maybe I should go live in the caves and go meditate. Like literally, that was one of the things
Yeah.
that came up for me, right? And
Which is
maybe I
something
should.
you could do at 25, but not at 45 or
Correct.
40, 45 with three
Correct.
kids, right? Like if there's a time to go explore and to be asking those questions and to be seeking those journeys, it's when you're untethered and free.
Yes. And so, and I'm going with a thread here that's not a usual thread that I share, which is why this is kind of fun, right? So this is part of the story. So, and I was considering, do I go into like the Peace Corps and go live in doing that work? Like I was really motivated back to this point, by purpose. Like even though I wanted to get that financial outcome, that purpose, that impact, that desire was really core to me, and even had a level of dissatisfaction of that in my mid-20s, right? And so I had this moment where I was like, I need to really figure this out, right? I had this, it was that level of, like almost a stuckness for me that I had to figure out. It was like an obsession. And to be blunt, it was, and I've told this story only a handful of times, and I've just started recently telling it. But for me, there was a really pivotal moment in my teens that was hugely impactful to my own self-worth and how I showed up. And basically I was a 14-year-old kid, and I was on a wrestling team, and I lost a match to a girl, right? And for me at the time, this was back to your idea about masculinity and femininity and with that piece, that was a hugely influential moment, because prior to that match, my teammates were all teasing me, right, leading up to it, like, if you lose, we're going to make fun of you. It's going to follow you, like all this stuff. So I visualized losing, right, and I saw the power of that, and then I literally walked out of the mat. 45 seconds later, I get pinned. It was so humiliating at the time, right? But it was also, at the time, I didn't really appreciate it fully, but it became this like self hatred of my, like I was really just beat myself up like for pretty much a decade, and it was not really conscious. It was almost subconscious, but it was there, and there was this talk track in my mind where I was just constantly just beating myself, right, for how I had failed. I was not man enough. I was a failure, like all this stuff, and I was humiliated. And it was just that moment that for me, like, didn't even realize how much that was pushing me to be outwardly successful, but also just totally detaching from who I really was at the core, right? Because I was creating this external focused identity and never really actually doing any of this work. But it got to this point when I was in my mid-20s where I was just like, I need to do work on this. And so I started working with non-traditional counselors to start doing like energetic clearing. And to be real, it brought me down this path of um, intergenerational like downloads, right? The way that subconscious affects us through layers. And I started to, and I literally have not talked about this on a podcast. This is the first time. And I started to release energies that I had subconsciously inherited through my grandparents and my parents. And some of these truths, even these stories may or may not even be fully true, but in the mind of a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, all these little micro things that happen in life that we ascribe a meaning to, I started to unpack them and layer them on like a both a conscious and an unconscious level, and accept them and heal them and redefine them. And that opened up the entire path of my life, right? Because it all of a sudden came into acceptance of me and of my story and all those different pieces that had in some level held me back. And it opened up this whole other world of entrepreneurial success, that because it was no longer about money. It really was about this journey of self-discovery. And it's what opened me up into going off eventually and starting my own businesses and letting into all of that. But that, for me personally, that decade of my life in particular, and that work, that moment of acknowledging that, because I buried that story, right, for years. Like, it was something that I didn't tell anybody. Like, I was always, oh, I'm good. I have this. But for me, that was like, it was just there. It was my personal like crucible that I felt so ashamed and embarrassed about. Right. And I didn't let anybody know that story. And even to the point where, a lot of the people that were around my life, like, it was never talked about. Like, it was just, it happened. And in the scheme of it now, like, I look at it now as a more mature and more developed person. And I'm like, who gives an F? Like, it doesn't matter at all. Right. It was so irrelevant. But in that moment, as being a 14-year-old kid, where I'm going for this transition of being a kid into a perceived man in a very different cultural time, that was like everything to me, right? The identity of being cool and being tough and being a man, like, and then having that stripped away, it influenced me on so many levels. And I did, to that point in college, like, I did things that were not aligned with my higher interests, right? Around, substances and different things that I would have, in hindsight, I'm glad I was fortunate not to go down that path, but I abused, certain elements just to numb it, or to reframe it, or to change myself. And ultimately, it took some time to unlayer that and get into that. So, like I said, I'm appreciative of the moment to share this. And I appreciate that I can tell that you appreciate the sharing of the story. But so to that point, I told this story. It was kind of funny. I was at an event in Utah 2 months ago. And it was a group of highly successful entrepreneurs, massively successful guys. And it was a group of guys. And the facilitator of the group was like, tell us your most embarrassing moment of your life. And even still, that was the one thing that came in my head. And I was like, I don't want to tell this story. I was like, I'm not telling this story. I don't want to tell this story. But I'm trying to go through another embarrassing moment, right? And I was like, it's the single most embarrassing moment for me still, at a core deep level. Like, it still had a charge. Right. And I told it, right, to this group of people who I really cared what they thought about me, right? And I was like, and I told it, and there was a couple of chuckles, and it was fine, and it didn't even faze me, right? I was like, cool. And I went home that night, and I was like, man, those chuckles, is that still reflecting? And I tuned into it. I was like, no. And I was like, it's good that you told it, because it means that you really own that, and you can frame it, and you can acknowledge it, and you can digest it. And it gave me so much power the next day, right, in terms of what happened from that point forward. And I came home, and it's just that same moment. And even like when I go back, there's a point where I first told that story to a public audience. This is like 10, I don't know how long it was, 10, 15 years, 12 years ago. And I stood up in front of a whole group of people and told the story. And that was the first time where I kind of let it release. And it was part of that whole process. So, like, it's such a small, cheesy story in the scheme of reality, but I made it such a big deal. And it was such a huge thing that drained me and restricted my life. And so I tell that because it's like, there's so many other layers of things that have happened in my life, but also to have way bigger challenges and struggles and traumas that happen in people's lives that we make into this something that it doesn't need to be, but it really just needs to be expressed, digested, supported, guided, and healed, so that people can become who they're meant to be, right, on a spiritual level. So anyway, that was a fun little story to share. I appreciate you giving me space for it. So
thank you. so much for that share. And I just want to take a minute to really honor the fact that you're talking about that and moving through it. And, it's really, as I hear you saying it, like, it's such a paradox because it is both a little nothing story and inconsequential and this massive thing that happened in your life that shaped so many different versions of who you were going to be and how you were going to portray yourself to the world. And what I kept hearing in my mind is right as you started telling the story is like, what a gift that actually ended up being for you.
Yeah.
And I think, my belief, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, but my belief is that a lot of the things that we are like scared to share or put out there or nervous about, we're worried about this judgment. What are people going to think? And when we step into those, we find, we're not alone. Right. Yeah. That other people have their version of getting pinned, in a wrestling match by a girl. Right. And whatever capacity that looks like, everybody's got their thing. Yeah. But the courage to not only share it on this podcast, but the fact that it came to your mind, like, you had this gift from God going, hey, you want to do some more work? Like, share this story right now. And you're like, no, like, and I know I've had that thing too, where somebody asks me something and the thing pops up and I'm like, no, not that. Like, scroll, swipe right. Like, how do I say no to this? And it's like, there is no choice. You can't think of anything in those circumstances. Yeah. And so, the fact that you answered the call then, that really says a lot about the work and how you're facing these things and how you're moving forward. And, it's beautiful because I look at these things like gifts, right? Yes. And sometimes the gift wrapping on these gifts is like sandpaper and barbed wire, and it hurts and you get cut and you're scraping yourself and you're like, oh, but you got to peel all that stuff off. You got to take the layers off, like you said. And then once you pull all that stuff off, you go, wow, like, how that motivated me to do work and to protect myself. And I didn't have the ability to deal with it then, but I can deal with this now. Yeah. And I can go back and I can heal that person at 14 years old. And I can go all the way back to where I am right now. And I can heal every version of myself during that time. And it doesn't matter if you're 4 or 14 or 84, you can do that work to like pull those things through. And it ends up being this like, because I could tell by the way you're telling the story now, like, oh man, I'm telling the story and I'm going through it. And it's also like, you know that it's going to be received, like where you've already arrived at. Yes. So the beauty of stepping into that share, man, wow. Like, thank you. Just really appreciate it.
I appreciate the invitation to share it. Truly. That's what I felt. And I was like, maybe this, just felt right. And it's something that's become part of the path. Right. And it really was, I would not have done any of that self-inquiry had it not been for that. It just got to a point where it was like, this is not working. Right. And so it began that process of a whole nother level. And that's why Life Guides, that's why I chose to be a part of Life Guides, because that's about, everyone has those stories. Everyone has that path. And that goes back to that point. That's why we're here. Like, there's that phrase of walking each other home, right? That's literally, we're doing this in the context of the business world. Right.
Ram Dass, right? We're all just walking each other home, man. I think this is a really beautiful segue, because I want to bring something up that you talked about when you were talking about elders, right? To be able to seek out your elders. And when we share stories like that, we're sharing wisdom. Yes. And I think that, because of technology today, we have a lot of information. Yeah. There's a lot of knowledge out there, but there's not necessarily a lot of wisdom. And what's the difference? People ask me all the time. Well, wisdom is the practical application of knowledge. It is the life experience of, why there was a tribe of elders and a council and healers, because these people have got why do you ask the guy who's, 88 years old and been through, 72 hard winters? Because they know, they've gone through the experience, right? Yeah. They didn't read about it in a scroll or a blog post somewhere. Not that there's anything wrong. It's beautiful that we get to share this information. But the difference is, in wisdom, is you're not reading about managing your anxiety or going through a difficult divorce. And these are the 7 strategies. Those are beautiful to have. Yeah. And when someone can look at you in the eye and say, man, I've dealt with it. I've gone through this infidelity that you're stepping into, and it doesn't make you less of a man. It doesn't make you a bad father. this is the experience that I felt, and all
Yeah.
your feelings are okay, and all your emotions are okay, and you said talked about taking care of parents and Alzheimer's and dementia. Like, these are things that people need a resource. We need that tribe of elders to be
Yes.
able to go to and have those conversations.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like how you set up really this tribe of elders, these experienced peoples, and really what Life Guides offers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, there's this idea, there's all this knowledge right now, right? I mean, we would, right. That's the whole point. But the whole
Yeah,
is we
it'd be
need to
done.
the action is part of the journey here. That's why we're here, is to put the knowledge into action. That's to gain that wisdom, right? Fully believe that. And to our conversation, like, that is practice. That is hard. There will be scars and injuries along the way if you're doing it right. Like, it's not going to be just easy and straightforward. It's going to require that you have to develop some fortitude and some resilience and some just stick through it,
Yeah.
and even and to persist even through certain emotions and stories that we tell ourselves, right? And so that fundamentally is a big part of why Life Guides exists, right? So back to the business just for one moment, and the mission, because it is a mission more than a business. It's about, how do we connect people to share their stories, who have been through something in their life, learned certain lessons, navigated it well, or learned a certain perspective that they can then share with someone earlier on the path, right? It's the modernization of that elder piece and attributing those specific experiences. And there's there's thousands of unique experiences, from losing a loved one unexpectedly, to caregiving for aging parents, to positive things, becoming a first-time parent. It's a massive adjustment. Relocating for promotion, right? And getting adjusted into a new city or a new country. Shifting.
Luckily,
Yeah.
when you become a parent, they just give you that operation manual when you leave the hospital, and you're good.
Well,
Like,
so it's funny you say that, right? Because
yeah,
exactly, it's 100% right. And in a way, that's what Life Guides is trying to do for being a human being. It's giving you access to real world, guides and a manual, but a human manual, and access to
yeah.
content and search for your life experience, right? So you
Well, that's
don't have
better
to.
than a manual.
Bingo.
Being able
Yeah.
to talk to somebody and say, my kid hasn't slept in 3 days. I'm doing something wrong. What the fuck do I do? And you're like,
Yeah.
welcome, bro. You're a parent now. Like,
Yes.
you're not fucking it up. You didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, because just because we're on the path of parenting, and again, I like, as a father, I just feel this resonance with you. But like, had I had someone to talk to, and I talked to my dad, and I had some of these things, but he's also in grandpa mode, so he's just
Right.
like, for him, it's pure elation. Like,
Yeah.
It's been so far for you that you forgot what it's like in the
Yes.
trenches for the first
Yes.
18 months. And
Yeah.
so like, I remember my wife and I, we got home, and like, I looked at her and I said, there's a fucking baby here now.
Yeah.
She started laughing and then crying immediately after that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know. Like, what are we doing here?
It's so true. That is the essence of it. I mean, absolutely the case. Absolutely the case. And what better than to be able to talk to another dad who's, a few years ahead of you. So, and to your point, like, okay, this is normal. This is just some feedback. Here's some tips. Here's some suggestions. Boom, and you go put it into action. And I'll layer that against every aspect, every experience of your life, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right? And so it's the unexpected challenges, it's the triumphs, it's everything in between. And it's not about, back to this idea, we trademarked this idea, more casual than therapy, more qualified than a friend, right? That's this concept of what we're doing, really. But it totally changes the conversation. It's not, we talked about the pre-COVID, especially the stigma around mental health. No, man, that's part of why we're here, is to figure this stuff out, right? And so if you don't feel comfortable going to see a practitioner, just talk to another dad who's been in your shoes. Talk to another veteran who's gone down the path and is healing into their civilian life after being in combat, right? Talk to another person who's gone to that path of being a caregiver for their aging parents, and they spent that 10-year journey learning those lessons and experiencing the struggles not for nothing, but so they can be shared. There's actually a point. There's a meaning in having gone through that journey, that it wasn't just about them having to take that on, but now they can express that, they can release that, and they can help. It can be used. It can be useful for someone else, right? And that's what we're really cultivating here. That's why you can tell I'm passionate. It's way more than a business. We only made it a business because currency and the capital allows us to move faster and accelerate, right? That ultimately, it allows this to exist in the modern time because it's the world we live in. If it was a nonprofit, we'd spend so much time focusing on survival,
trying to raise money.
Survival as opposed to sustainability. And the goal, the vision for this is the kind of thing that could exist, 100, 1,000 years from now if we do this right. Right. Yeah. This is again, fundamental human being stuff. Like, this is like, we're here for this. Imagine you did come out and say, hey, you have access to life guides immediately for your entire journey. You have it. You could be a guide. You can receive guidance. You can access this. So this is the vision for this is massive from our standpoint. Right.
And look, man, I you hit on so many things here, right? Because I think everybody has something that they can offer and something that they can receive.
Bingo.
Right? And this is I want to segue into the business as I ask this question through this acknowledgement. And one of the things that I've had with I've had these conversations with my wife at times and some other friends, because I do a lot of coaching and walk through with people what my experiences are. And I find it very ironic that how many armchair quarterbacks are out there, right?
Yes.
Like, my wife would talk to some of her friends and be like, well, we had this fight and they said this and this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but that person is not in a relationship. Like why would you, I'm not going to take
right.
advice financially from somebody who's broke. I'm not going to take relationship advice from somebody who's not in a relationship that I admire or establish to be or recognize as some credence. Yes. Or parental advice from somebody who I'm like, well, look at what they got going. Like, we're going to do what they like. The people that we look to emulate, right? The people that we look to have these conversations with. And this is what I tell a lot of my friends. Like, if you want to have a council of friends, and this is like, life guides can replace this in so many ways. But if you want to talk to somebody, there's 3 types of friends you want. There was a friend who's just going to sit there and listen. Right? Yeah. They can hold space. They don't need to say anything. You can data dump. Here's the story, particularly if we're in our feminine, right? Sometimes we just need to here's all the shit and I'm fucking mad and blah, blah. Like, you let it out, right?
Yeah.
The second person is the one that sees you and says, I understand, and this is what's going on. And I understand where you're at on this ground and how you're seeing it. And they're giving you feedback to support you and your point of view, yes. Which isn't always the best for your relationship, but it's also an express point of being seen, right?
Yes.
The third friend, right, should be somebody that you look up to and you want to get counsel from specifically to help it, right? So support of me, support of my relationship or what I'm going through. And some people are all 3 of those, right? Mm-hmm. Some people very clearly should only be at that first rung. Yes. Maybe they can do the second one, but again, this idea of being able to go and have someone who's like qualified to yes. speak on this, because they've been with their partner for 18 years and married for 15 and they got 2-3 kids and they're going through this and you're like, I don't know what to do and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, I can tell you what my experience was. And it's just yes. that share.
Yes. And for whatever reason, to your point, Hager, a lot of people don't even have those friends, right?
Correct.
Which is the other wild thing. For whatever reason, a lot of people don't even have any of those 3 friends. And so, or they don't feel safe enough to even have those types of friends, right? And that's another piece, that's another gap that we're bringing in. And so bringing both of those communities that you described, the community of having those friends like people and having the separation of detachment from the personal investment also helps, right? Because it helps to balance that support, right? And to your point, you can get all 3 of those modalities, quote unquote, from a guide, right? And you can also choose to have different guides for different areas of your life. And that there's a level of, they're not telling you what to do. They're just saying, this is what I did. This is the things that worked well. These are things that I wish I had known.
Important distinction too, right?
Yes.
Because it's someone's path doesn't always relate to you, but just the fact that they've gone through it can be enough. Like,
exactly.
Oh, thank God, it's not just me. Like this tribe that you're talking about.
Bingo. Yes. And you're like, and there's hope in that, right? That's part of, we talk about this, like, when early on in the founding of Life Guide, we were like, we're in the business of empathy. This was pre-COVID, pre-empathy becoming this well talked about idea that it's become over the last couple of years. But we're like, this is what we're doing. We're helping people to be matched, right? In that situation. You still there?
Are you good?
I'm good. I lost the connection there for a second.
Oh, no worries. Well, we'll fix that in post.
Awesome.
Hang on. So we're back on?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're good.
we look good on my end. So yeah, I think stepping into that arena to be able to give people that tribe and that council of elders is so important. And you talked about that. Said you have 400 active guides, 1,000 people on the waiting
Yeah,
list waiting for certification. Talk a little bit about what
yeah.
that process looks like as you bring someone on board.
Yeah, so from the standpoint of how we bring in our guides, Hager, we recruited from all different topics. So if you've been through these different experiences, come onto our platform, and we bring guides through multiple rounds of interviews, and then we background check them, and then we invest in them to go through our credentialing certification process to become a life guide. And it's a multi-phase curriculum, digital as well as human supervised, all different elements related to how to do appreciative inquiry, active listening, certain questions, certain feedback and mirroring, into technological components, into referrals and escalations for certain situations that may require another level of care, into all different elements related to just the quality of the call and developing further skills. And so beyond the fact that we've aligned a compensation model for guides, there's a whole educational and talent component to what we're doing as well, because we believe that this, obviously many people who are guides are motivated by service and paying it forward, but we also believe that by aligning other incentives around it, such as being in a community, doing that work around healing, being part of that educational framework, developing skills that can be utilized in other pursuits of other employment, financial opportunities, those are all pieces of why people choose to become a guide, and we're building that platform to help monetize that.
It's really beautiful that you guys have taken the time to really like step through, right? Because one of the concerns can obviously be what happens when something comes in and it's too big for that person, right?
Yeah.
You've got somebody that's dealing with suicidal ideations or they're freaking out. Like, to know that like you're giving your guys the resources to say, all right, this is above my pay grade. I'm in it with you, and this is where we need to take it next, or this is where we go.
Yes.
And I think more often than not, even in some of those really extreme situations, what do most people want when they're in their most dire straits? They just want to know that somebody cares and that somebody's listening, right?
Yes.
Like that ability. And we were talking about it, before we had our little tech issue. So I could probably go through that training myself to make sure we got it good. But to know that you're not alone, sometimes is just that there is enough to get people to like take that exhale of breath and go, right. And, I think it's a weird phrase, but I think, misery loves company. Really was born more of like just knowing that you're not the only one that's going through something, right?
Yes.
It's not that I need other people to be miserable. It's like, okay, I'm not the only one.
So yes, we wholly agree. That's a significant portion of what people need, just to be seen and supported, right? And to your point, to avoid that issue of misery loves company, that's why the guides model, that someone has to have gone through it ahead of you, successfully gone through it, worked through it, is a really important part of this piece, because we don't want people triggering each other's trauma or their experiences and creating that dynamic. We want it to be that we're moving towards something. To your point, you're emulating that experience. You're bringing that hope that one gets from talking to that person who's been there and been through it and knows that it's possible to get through it. That's an important part of this dynamic. That's the healthy part of what makes this work. And so, to your point, that's an important element of how this comes together in supporting the guides model, as we refer to it.
Yeah. I think because otherwise you commiserate in misery by going, hey, your feelings are valid. I see you. I understand. And I can tell you, as someone who's been through it, that this too shall pass. Right?
Absolutely.
This is what I did. Maybe it helps you, maybe it doesn't, but at least you can, because if I can do it, somebody else can do it.
And that's fundamentally another part about being human, right? That exact phrase you described. If someone can do it, anyone technically can do it, right? Yeah. In terms of possibility, right? And so that just opens up that whole frame.
It's the Roger Bannister, right? The 4-minute mile. Like, the human body won't explode if we run faster. Like, okay, well then all of a sudden 4 other people are breaking that within the next 30 days. Like, it's like, and that again is like, I'm not alone. Somebody else got through it. How do I do that myself? Right. It's just that we talk a lot about these breadcrumbs in here, but that's that tread of like, I will have this thing tick back up and I'll move through it because somebody else has.
Well said, man.
Beautiful, brother. Beautiful. Well, we're getting to the end of this. I mean, I feel like we could like do like
We
a
could
Joe
chat for
Rogan
hours.
style. Yeah, I think we
We're
could
gonna
do
have
like
to
3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, we'll have to do it in person one of these at some point. Maybe
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
jungle or the desert. We'll have to jam.
Dude, I would love you, dude. You tell me when you want to get out. I know that you'll be a guest on this again for sure, and I would love to come on Rebels of the Heart as well. That sounds like it'd be a good time. But
Absolutely.
we like to end this podcast, and we've got these 10 questions inside the Guru Studio, sort of a twist on Inside the Actor Studio.
Yeah.
And so if you got an answer, great. If not, I might wait for a minute to make it awkward and make sure that you don't have an answer.
Okay.
But these are 10 questions. First one is current book or podcast that you're listening to or reading right now.
So the Daily Stoic actually is the one that I've been tapping into on almost a daily basis. I mean, obviously it's a Daily Stoic, so it's a daily basis book. I have a couple others that are kind of in progress, but yeah, that's that one. And then podcast, the most recent one I listened to, I think, was a Huberman Lab. So
Huberman, yeah. That's always a good one. That's a winner right there. What's something that's sacred in your life that you do every day?
Pray and or meditate. That's basically come down and have a cup of coffee, sit in front of the fire, or go outside, and that's how I begin my day.
Love it, man. Love it. Name something or someone that makes you laugh.
My daughter.
I love it, man. Dude, the kids are they're such a mirror for who we are, but the things that start to come out of their mouth, and I know you're 2, 4, and 6, you said that is like the wheelhouse where things start to really turn into some funny things.
And I would say all 3 of the kids make me laugh, but just the order, they all do it different ways, right?
Yeah. So. That's the beauty, man. That's the beauty. What a reflection. How do you unwind from a long day?
I like to exercise. For me, exercise is my way to actually get the most stress out. So I go to the gym, I go for a run. For me, getting in motion, getting exercise is a great way for releasing.
Got to move that body, man. Got to move that body. What do you do to prepare for a big day?
Usually just have some focus time, right? I just have a little bit of time, really, either take some notes. I wouldn't say I'm a big journaler, but I'm a scriber a little bit. I'll make some I'll do some prep. I'll think about some of the key things I want to accomplish. I have a list of goals or things I need to get done that day. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of a general. I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast ritual, but if I'm having an intense day, I kind of map it out.
Yeah, clear the mechanism, get ready for your day.
Exactly.
So knowing that you love your job and where you're at now, all things being equal, what's another profession you would love to attempt?
Another profession. That's a really interesting phrase. I would say I'm more of a hobby than a profession, but I'd like to get really into surfing. Back to your point, if I lived near the ocean, I would probably get really into going into surfing. So it's not a profession so much, but it's something I actually probably. Yeah, it could be.
Well, we'll get you out to the jungle, man. I'm 7 minutes from the beach. Right. What is the worst job you've ever had?
That's a really good question. The worst job I've ever had. I don't really have a worst. I mean, I've done all different types of jobs, I think, this is, in terms of sales jobs, I'll tell you a sales job I had. When I was in college, when you're in the mall, and we used to have malls back in the day. For people who are watching this, there was a place you would go that had all these stores, right? And you could go shopping. Now everything gets done online, but back in the day, there was a mall, and there were these little like kiosks in the mall where they'd sell like heating pads and like massage kits and like
cell phone chart cases.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I remember the kiosks.
So I worked in one of those. Like freshman year of college, and tried my hand at selling. And I'll say it was definitely a humbling experience trying to sell those things. So
yeah, I bet, man. I bet. Gave you some perspective as to where you really wanted to do and what was going on in life.
Yeah.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
I think a big part of what we had talked about, just really even what we're doing, just getting to know people, like really figuring out what makes people tick and helping people develop that pathway and to, give relationships and access to develop that skill or that journey or that perspective. My work is very much in line with that passion. So, yeah. And it is spiritually driven, as we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, you could tell, man. There's a lot of passion as you're talking about it, which is exciting to see somebody who's, there's unfortunately right now it's pretty ubiquitous for most that they don't necessarily love their job, and it's when you find somebody that does, that fire normally lights your fire, even if you're like, sometimes I hear somebody talk about somebody, it doesn't resonate with me at all, but what does resonate is their passion for it.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, like, dude, all right, I'm in. Like,
Yeah.
I guess I'll try whatever that thing is because you seem really excited about it. So, huge. What's one piece of advice or wisdom that you've received that you've never forgotten?
Do the work. I mean, that transcends all different elements, right? Do the actual work. Like don't half-ass anything. Like give it everything, right? And that's whether it be in a work environment, in a relationship, in developing your identity, in developing your skills, developing your health, your fitness, right? The work is the expansion of that energy, is the best way to put it, right? And so going all in on that and not mailing it in at any level is a key part of it. So
beautiful. Yeah, spot on, brother. Last question, number 10. One piece of advice you could give your 18-year-old self if you were to go back and talk to him. Nothing about stock tips or buying Bitcoin or who's going to win the Super Bowl, but what's one thing that you could give as 18-year-old Derek? You grab them and you've got 2 minutes. What do you say?
It's a really great question, and kind of along the lines of our conversation. One aspect would be kinder to myself at that point, right? Just more patience, more compassion for that version of me, and then also get more focused sooner, right? So I spent too much time kind of in this window that we talked about that just wasn't really part of the path, and I think getting that focus and getting that guidance for earlier on would have been good, I think. But it still worked out exactly as it's supposed to work out, Hager. So
always does, right? Always does. I think that's the beauty of that one is everything happens for the reason that it needs to happen, right? You and I both believe that all those things are a gift, and a little perspective goes so far to just, give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Derek, brother, man, this has been awesome. We've spent almost an hour and a half together, about an hour on the podcast, but I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited about the potential of Enrollify and Life Guides working together. This has ignited that fire as well. We will drop all the information on Life Guides, how you can find them, get more information, whether you want to be a guide, receive guidance, whatever it might be. We'll upload all that information in the show notes. And brother, you're welcome back on the Do You Guru podcast anytime, my friend. And
I appreciate it.
Don't be surprised if I give you a call randomly just to say what's up and get your ass out here for some surfing.
Awesome. That's going to happen. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
All right, brother. Thank you.